You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
What a week it was. The NHL season. It's down the runway. It's in flight. I'm Dan. This is Julie. We've got a Leaf team's on a roll. We've got a former captain selling amulets that protect you from Wi-Fi. And Julie,
allegedly,
I tried to watch the Amazon Prime series. I haven't made it through the first episode yet. Does it pick up?
Dan, I would not know if it picks up because I have currently paused it.
You're in pause mode, just like me.
At the time that William Nylander and David Pastrnak are about to go against one another after all of the childhood. The pictures of them together are really cute. The videos,
very cool.
Great.
And they do get into why Nylander missed the first few games of that series, so I'm glad they showed that. But
it's
I haven't
just
got
tough to compete against, the Menendez brothers, or this
so
Secret
there needs
Lives
to be
of
more
Mormon
murdering.
Wives, or there's a lot. Yeah, there's just it's a competitive market, really, for eyeballs, right? So you got to have a little bit of salaciousness, something, a little je ne sais quoi. The amethyst does help, I would say.
Yeah.
Anytime you can get something a little cuckoo caca, it helps eyeballs.
We need to do a total of how many current shows and movies you can watch on all the streaming services, because it will blow your mind. Like how you're supposed to find eyeballs in that sea of things to watch. That's for another story. But we've got two great guests today, Julie.
Yes, because we have eyeballs here, Dan. That's how you get eyeballs here. Is you have great guests and you have amazing discussions about the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are one team they can beat an LA team. That's a bit of a dig at the Mets. Sadly, OMG, they lost. Nobody would really care about that at Toronto. But John Gibbons is on the team as a coach.
Mm-hmm. Toronto Connection.
All right. Yeah, Toronto Connection. And we are excited to be able to welcome in analyst and host and former scout, EJ Hradek.
EJ, I first have to ask, so I say this to my kids. Okay, I got good news and bad news. When someone says that to you, do you take the good news first or the bad news first?
That's a great question. I would prefer, I think, in this hypothetical, to take the good news first and maybe avoid the bad news.
I always do it this way, though. I take the bad news because then you get uplifted by the good news. But you want to start with good news. We're talking Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the positives for this team very early into this season.
Well, there's a lot of them right now. I mean, they come off just a good performance against a LA Kings team that is, they're in the middle of this 7-game road trip to open the season, and they had a tough one in Ottawa, and they didn't play much better against the Leafs. But Matthews got on the board, so everybody's excited. Everybody was I can't believe there would be nervousness over Austin Matthews not scoring in a couple of games, but he got on the board, so that was good news. That BMW line that has kind of been thrown together quick. Bobby McMahon and William Nylander looked terrific last night. I mean, I guess he always looks terrific. He's just one of those guys. And Max Domi in the middle, those guys playing well together, getting contributions from all over the lineup. I don't know. I mean, that was a really nice performance, and I thought the Leafs were off to a good start, and Anthony Stolarz was very good again, made some good saves. Early in the second period, the Leafs had a 3-0 lead, but the Kings made a little push there, got some good chances, and Stolarz stood tall. They got a couple of power play goals. More good news. Julie, there was all kinds of good news for the Leafs on Wednesday night.
Yeah, EJ, there's so much good news that it's almost difficult to figure out what to focus on. But let's focus on in net, because that has been always the Achilles heel of the Toronto Maple Leafs. We know that Joseph Woll is out with injury, but Anthony Stolarz comes in, and in a way, do you think that maybe he has made a case to be the starting goaltender going forward?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think that it's an open, listen, they went out and signed Joe Woll in the offseason. They like him. He's been their guy. And when he's healthy, he's played well. But when is he healthy? It seems like he's always dealing with some kind of, injury. I mean, last year, Game 7, he couldn't play in that game. So, I think to have Anthony Stolarz there, he comes in from Florida. He's played over 100 games now in the National Hockey League. He's a big goaltender. And, something that goes under the radar, guys, is that, I got to talk to him during the final. He's a New Jersey guy, so I've gotten to know him a little bit. I've actually played men's hockey with him when he was out playing forward, which in defense, he's got a stick that's about 7 miles long, so it's hard to deal with him as a forward or a defenseman. But the thing about it is he played last year in Florida, and he was alongside Sergei Bobrovsky, and he talked a number of times about watching Bobrovsky prepare, and nobody does it like this guy.
Yeah.
And those kind of things do rub off on you. So I don't know if he's going to be the guy all year long, but I can see if Wall gets healthy and he's kind of trending that way, that maybe these guys do almost an even split, and Craig Berube can sit back and say, okay, who's playing well? Who does the team really play for? And when the time comes, maybe you make that decision at that point in time. But Stolarz might be a bigger part of this group than maybe people thought he would be at the start of the season.
I could actually talk about goalies all day, and my favorite thing is to question Leaf fans about their goaltending situation, because it doesn't matter who's in net, who they've got on the bench, who they've got in the minors. All of them are the next Carey Price. The Leafs have not had a standout goalie since at Belfour, Curtis Joseph. Those would be the last two. So should they be worried? I am worried for Leaf fans that they need a standout goalie to make that next step, but that's not what they have. Are they okay in net?
Well, you didn't count Justin Pogge. I mean, that was
he did not make the list.
That was someone that they thought was. I just met Justin Pogge last year. He's a really nice guy. He's a goalie and coach and doing a lot of different things. I think he's in Vancouver now. But at any rate, the bottom line is that listen, we'll see. Joseph Wall is kind of the guy that would fit that bill a little bit more because they've drafted and developed him. But again, injury issues. Is he going to stay healthy? In the league now, I mean, look around. There's very few guys that people lean on as the one. A lot of teams go, it's a long season. They go with two guys. Stolarz has proven he can play in this league. He had a really good year in Florida last year. Joseph Wall, when he has been healthy, has been a good goalie. Maybe he can come in, get healthy, find his way during the course of the season. I just think it's nice to have a couple of goalies. I mean, for Craig Berube, he's in St. Louis. They had the Jake Allen. They were moving away from him. They were going to go to Ville Husso. Ville Husso was hurt. Oh, here's Jordan Binnington arrives, and he plays well. I just think it's good to have a number of options. There are only so many Carey Prices or Igor Shesterkins or Sergei Bobrovskys out there. I like the two guys together if Wall stays healthy, and I think Stolarz can be, again, a bigger piece than they expected at the start.
Right. Okay, so you mentioned Craig Berube, and we're doing the good news. So
Yes.
In what way is the way that he coaches very good for the long term of the Leafs?
Well, if you want to win in the playoffs, Julie, you've got to play. You've got to be tougher to play against. You've got to be willing to defend. You've got to play all three zones. I mean, like last night in the game against L.A., you could see even when they gave up that goal in the third period, he wasn't thrilled with just some kind of loose play in the neutral zone that led to an opportunity and a goal against. So, I mean, those are the things I think Craig Berube will talk about and try to hammer home with this Leafs team. I mean, watching the game last night, and again, it's just one snapshot of an 82-game season against a team that seems to be struggling right now in L.A. But boy, I think they look different than the kind of teams they've had in the past. It's a little bit of a kind of a push off of what they did in the latter part of that series against Boston last year. And I think it's a good jumping point for them because if you're going to win, you've got to be hard to play against. You've got to play hard in all three zones. You've got to defend better. I think their defense is better with the additions of Tanev, and OEL has been a nice fit so far. He helped their power play certainly since kind of moving into that window. I think it takes some of the pressure off Morgan Riley. They've got a little bit of a deeper group. I'd love to see them go out and add another piece or two if they could at the deadline. But I think Craig Berube, this is going to be kind of one of those science experiments, right? We saw the Dubas era with trying to do things one way, and now we're seeing, and that was the Sheldon Keefe model. And now you're bringing in Craig Berube, who's going to do things a little differently. He's got a little bit better, I think, personnel on the whole, and a team that's probably more ready to take another step and having, you can only get, these guys are professionals. Losing it wears you. And some point in time, you come to that realization that, listen, we're going to do whatever it takes to win. So he comes at the right time. He preaches a message that helped him win a Stanley Cup with St. Louis in 2019. So they're going to be, listen, the Leafs, you guys know, the Leafs are always fascinating to watch because everybody's all over them all the time. And can they win? And they've got these star players. I do think this year is going to be, maybe it'll be a little different. Maybe I'm naive, but I like what I'm seeing so far.
Are you saying the Leafs are going to win the Stanley Cup, EJ?
Well, listen, we got a long way to go, Julie, but I do like their
yes
chances.
or no?
I do like their chances better. I do like their chances better. I won't say yes or no, but what I will say is I never really thought of them as a contender in the past. I thought of them as a pretender, really, when I looked at the way their team was built. I think they're more of a contender with the way this team is built.
And they're protected by an amulet that protects the team from Wi-Fi. That's the biggest controversy with the Leafs right now. If that's your biggest controversy, your former captain promoting an amulet that you hang around your neck that protects you from Wi-Fi, I think life's pretty good.
I have two. I got two of them. As soon as he was on board, I just had to get a couple.
What the hell? Those things are like $300.
Yeah, well, listen, we make a lot of money down here in the States.
Yeah.
We're all loaded. Don't you know we're all loaded? We're all making money hand over fist.
There's no price for your health, Dan.
That's right. Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
EJ, what a guy. I said guess. I wasn't lying. Here's Pierre McGuire.
We're now pleased to be joined by Pierre McGuire from his lovely reading room, and it doesn't look like it's very cold there right now, but we are going to head to somewhere cold, which is the ice. And the Toronto Maple Leafs on a tear right now.
Didn't know how that segue was going to go. You took a meandering route, but we got there.
That's what I usually do, go as far as I can away from the topic, then back. Okay. Pierre, Leafs have been in fuego right now. Last 3 games they've won. Even their first game was pretty good, just going up against a very good goaltender on the night. What's been maybe the biggest pro, like the thing that you love the most about this Leafs team to start?
The structure of their game, whether it's on the forecheck, whether it's through the neutral zone defensively, or whether it's in their own zone, Julie. Everything is structured. There's layering to it. You can see there's a clear plan. I love the way they can squeeze in neutral zone and almost squeeze the life out of the game when they have the lead. They're a great counterattack team, so when you are a team that can squeeze in neutral zone, you can counterattack because the opposition is going to turn the puck over. So I think the coaching staff has made a huge difference, whether it's Craig Berube, Mark Savard in the power play, Lane Lambert, Mike Van Ryn. That coaching staff has done a great job. And don't discount what Curtis Sanford has done. The last time I visited with you and Dan, we talked about Anthony Stolarz and the way I thought he could really impact the Toronto Maple Leafs. Curtis Sanford, who coaches the goalies, he's got to be thrilled with the way that Anthony Stolarz has played in goal for Toronto.
4 games in, if the mark of a coaching staff has already been printed onto a team, that's got to really jazz them thinking, okay, if they've got this after 4 games, think of what they can have after 30, after 60.
Dan, I love what you just said. And a big part of how you make your team better as a coaching staff is make sure they're a captive audience every day. So the more you win, the more captive the audience is. So this is the way you wanted to start as a new coaching staff. And I think, quite frankly, the Leaf players, Dan and Julie, they were ready for this. They were crying out. They were like guys in the woods, save us, we need help. We know we have the talent. Who's going to save us? And I think Craig Berube comes in, no nonsense. Nobody's complaining. You don't see any leaks coming out of the dressing room. Everybody enjoyed training camp. And all of a sudden, they're off to this great start that Julie talked about, Dan. And I think a big part of it is the coaching staff has a plan and the players believe in the plan.
Right. It's remarkable when you know what your expectations are and what you're doing. And when we see so many of these good players scoring, we're not surprised necessarily. But in the win against LA, Bobby McMann had 2 goals. What do you maybe expect for some of these guys that might not necessarily be sort of that core 4, the flair guys?
Well, first of all, there's a new trend in the league, Julie, and it hasn't been there forever. Usually it's been star power that's gotten you over the hump. But I think because we haven't had expansion in a few years now, there are 32 teams, everybody knows it. So now the talent bucket is kind of full. So how do you make sure you're going to take the next step? You have to have supplemental offense. Bobby McMann doesn't surprise me at all. I watched him play at Colgate University. I watched him play in the American Hockey League. He's a big guy. He's a fast guy. He's a guy that still had major upside. The old scouting staff that was there in Toronto deserves a lot of credit for bringing him in. I think Toronto's got role players that can score. Lorentz is a good example of it. David Kampf understands his role. Holmberg understands his role. Imagine John Tavares is playing as a third-line center. That's considered a role player in today's NHL. So, this is the first time I can tell you guys that I'm really bullish on Toronto. I can't say that all those other years where everybody was pumping their tires. Julie and Dan, I got to tell you, this is the first time I can say I could see them being able to swing with any big tree in the league and have a chance to win.
Can I do a deep dive on Bob McMahon? Because I didn't have a clue who this guy was. I'm already a fan. A couple of reasons. He went undrafted. He played in the AJHL. I call play-by-play for the Fort McMurray Oil Barons in the AJHL, a league that is now seeing a lot more of their graduates make it to the NHL. He played in Newfoundland in the ECHL.
Yeah.
And born and raised in Wainwright, Alberta. Bobby McMahon, my new favorite Toronto Maple Leaf. That is just a good story of a guy persevering and making it to the NHL, and now look what he's doing.
He put up big numbers in college, Dan. I got to tell you, he was a really important player for the Colgate Raiders. His coach was Don Vaughn, who's no longer coaching there. He's been taken over by Mike Harding, and Mike Harding's actually the player or the coach that actually recruited, Bobby McMahon. So there's a lot to that story. I love the way you talked about it. But here's the one thing that allows him to survive and thrive in the NHL as an undrafted player. His skating ability is elite. He is so strong on his feet. And you see that. You see him break free on the second goal that he scored last night. Yeah, it's a great pass to him. But look at how he just creates separation from the defense. He's one of those players, if you're a team, you pay your scouts a little bit more for going out and getting a player like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to touch on one more player that obviously gets a lot of criticism, but I think has done, I'll let you give your analysis on how you think he's done. Mitch Marner. How do you think he has done to start the season?
Julie, every single day he's getting better. And if you're a star player, that's what you need to do every single day because the tighting gets checked tighter and tighter. So here's the way I look at it. There are three components to an NHL season, Julie. There's the component before U.S. Thanksgiving. There's a component from U.S. Thanksgiving up until just before the trade deadline. Then there's a trade deadline to the end of the year. Each one of those components, the game changes. It gets faster, it gets harder, and it gets more intense. So your star players have to get faster, harder, and more intense. I see Mitch Marner through 4 games so far getting faster, harder, and more intense. Last night, he wanted to take over that game. Saturday night, the play that he makes against Pettersson up the boards, he wanted to take over and be magical on that play. So that's what you want to see from your star players. I think he's continuing to evolve. Obviously, it's a contract year. It's a huge year for him, Julie and Dan. I think he's going to do very well this year for Toronto. Like I said, I'm not going to couch it. I don't cheer for teams, but this is the first time I can tell you I got hope that Toronto can actually do something.
And you mentioned the change. It's almost like the players, they weren't babied or coddled before, but they knew they needed that stern parent, and that's what Berube's brought. Because if you've talked to way more hockey players than I have, they can credit a dad that worked them hard, drove them crazy, but got them to the NHL, and they can say that same thing about a coach. They said, I hated every second playing for him, but best coach I ever had. So a lot of times, careful what you wish for, but what you wish for is something that, I couldn't get
Dan,
it.
where you're meandering real far away.
No, but you want that. It's like having producer Tim. I want a producer Tim on board, even though we don't get along, but I'm like, I need that presence to keep us on the rails. So that's what I'm getting at. A player needs that presence, even though sometimes they don't want it.
So here's the one thing I'd say that makes me very optimistic about Toronto and Craig Berube. Having walked in his shoes a few times, usually you're a better coach after you get fired. Because at the end of that firing, you can go hang out and drown your sorrows, or you can go look in the mirror and have a real civilized, mature conversation with yourself. And one of the questions you have to ask is, what did I do right? So you hopefully have a long laundry list of things you thought you did right. Then you got to have the hard discussion. What'd you do wrong? Why'd you get fired? And more times than not, the coaches that rebound, they're the guys that have a really intense, hard conversation when they look in the mirror. And I think Berube did that. And one of the things that I think really helped Berube last year getting ready for this job, going on TV. He went on TNT in the United States. He worked in the studio. So when you do that, hopefully you're watching the games with an unbiased eye. And when you watch the game with an unbiased eye, you see the positives and the negatives of players and coaches and organizations. And I think one of the things he could see, what does Toronto need? And I think it was really apparent for a long time. They needed somebody to come in, kick butt, but be firm and fair. And that's what Craig Berube is. So there's a lot to like about this hire. And Dan, I think it speaks to your question is, how do you know that this coach is going to work? He's got a captive audience. The players know they need it. And he knows that he made some mistakes in St. Louis, and he knows he's got to adjust to those mistakes, and I think he has.
Right, and then same thing, I guess, for Sheldon Keefe then after being fired and then going with the Devils, right? They say like kind of the second job maybe after you've been fired, but keeping things in New York, but obviously with the Leafs, they're facing the Rangers. This has like a lot of potential for it to be something that maybe we see down the line, but two very good teams going up against one another. How do you think the Leafs fare against the Rangers?
I think well, because it's a home game, and I like the fact that they have 2 days. They played last night against LA. They get some more quality practice early in the year. Then they play the Rangers, and they're home again against Tampa before they have to go and play a back-to-back with Columbus. So, Julie, I love the way you asked that, because I think this could be an Eastern Conference matchup, obviously in the playoffs, and maybe an Eastern Conference final. It could be like that. It's amazing. But the truth is, when I look at the Rangers, if their power play's not going, I think they're going to have a problem. And so the power play, even though they've had some success, it's not nearly as successful as it was last year to start the year. They miss Ryan Lindgren on defense. I think he's going to be back sooner rather than later. I don't think he'll be back for the Ranger game, but that'll make a difference for them. I think the one place the Rangers are a little ahead, not a lot, just a little, is in goal. Shesterkin's a real deal. And that's not a knock on Stolarz. It's not a knock on Joseph Wall. It's not a knock on Dennis Sotheby. I just think if you did a poll around the league, most people would have Shesterkin 1, 2, or 3 in terms of quality goaltender. That's probably the only place I see the Rangers having a bit of an edge. And one other thing, and this has not gotten enough credit. When you look at the Leafs defense this year, there's two things. Ekman Larsson's one. But there's one other thing that makes a difference, and it's Christopher Tanev. When you watch him play now, there's structure and stability. There was a couple switch calls last night in the third period. I'm watching as a coach, not as a fan. And I'm watching him take charge in his own zone. I'm going, wow, Julie, this guy's good. Wow, Dan, this guy gets it. He's making the job easier for everybody else. And I think Treliving, the general manager, doesn't get enough credit. He had the guy in Calgary, and he knew his character, and he knew his personality. And the first opportunity he had to get him in Toronto, he signs him. And I think that's going to be a major signing for Toronto if Christopher can stay healthy.
Pierre, thanks, buddy.
Dano, anytime. I'm so proud and excited to be working with you and Julie. It's going to be so much fun. I'm really pumped.
Yeah, baby! So, Binksy, EJ, and Pierre, they're part of our team now. They're part of the Bet Rivers family. You're going to be seeing them all year.
I mean, pretty big deal for us to have Pierre McGuire and EJ Hradek on our show here, talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs all the time. We are, I believe, the number one Leafs podcast right now. I don't have the stats on that, but that's what the spirit guides are telling me right now, is that it is number one. And also, it's a tough time to get eyeballs, as we know, with sports being so busy. So it's great to see that the Leafs are on a hot run while we're getting things going.
Hot run.
Hot run. Just like what we're going to do in Mount Tremblant. Hot run.
Hot runs. All Black Diamonds, baby.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.